Really?
So ThinkGard, we got involved with ThinkGard as an actual backup solution. So they have a cloud-based backup solution that has a piece of an appliance that they bring in, and it's worked wonderfully for us. We've actually had to use it here recently. But beyond that, they have a business continuity, and they have a ransomware with their CyberGuard product that allows them to help not only protect, but to remediate against any of your ransomware attacks and such. I can tell you that in all cases, they're very effective and they're very fair, and they've been very good to us as a nonprofit, speaking on my day job, for the things that they've done for us. So without much further ado, and without going and introducing everybody, I'll bring ThinkGard up and let them come up and introduce themselves. Come on up, guys.
I'll introduce them when we go. Awesome. Do we actually need the microphone?
Just so the folks there can hear you.
Okay, I just want to make sure. And this handheld, can I walk on top?
It is.
Awesome. You move around a little bit, that way it won't be quite so boring. Yes, this is a case study we're doing today, but it's not about Matthew specifically. So just in case you're thinking it was, it's not. So we want a clicker or something? Or? Awesome. So we're super excited to be here today while we get that worked out. This is the first in-person event that we've done since February of last year, which was actually in Jacksonville, February of last year. So we're very excited to be back doing things in person. I think we counted in 2019, we did 27 in-person events, and we did 3 last year. So we're really excited to be back on the road and doing our thing. So I don't need the first slide anyway. So today what we're doing is a case study about one of our customers who was actually hit with a ransomware attack and kind of walking through all of that. And the cool thing about a case study, as opposed to just a presentation on products and services and things like that, is that it's really about putting yourself in the position of, if this happened to you, what would that look like? How would you react? How would you respond? How would it go for you in the same situation without you having to actually have done it yourself? So the fact that we've done several of these, and Cole has done a ton of them, and he's going to come up a little bit, where we actually have to put ourselves in that position to jump into the foxhole with the actual company who's been hit with the attack. It's not fun. You don't want to do it, and hopefully we can learn some things today that'll keep that from happening to you. I got you guys as a tip.
Come on, Oz.
We're all good.
So I've got a slide for this, but I don't really need it. So the main thing to keep in mind today is this is going to be an educational presentation. If you were hoping for a dog and pony show, it's not going to be that. We really pride ourselves on, when we do things like this, it being an educational presentation, and it be something where you actually hopefully walk away knowing something you didn't know before. A lot of this you may know already, but if we can have a situation where when you leave today, you know something that you didn't know before, I will have felt like that we did what we needed to do to be successful. Just as we'll talk a little bit about us as a company. Again, this isn't a marketing spiel, but I think it's important to understand for the story that we're going to tell today, is that we are a managed services IT company, but we're very specific to data protection. And so what data protection meant for us since we were founded in 2013 has been mostly backup and disaster recovery business continuity. So that's what we do, is a managed backup and disaster recovery solution. That's what Matthew has at Pace. That's what we've done traditionally for the last 8 years or so. Last year, we actually added to that cybersecurity as a service, where we're actually providing cybersecurity on an ongoing basis for our customers. And the idea there is we had all these customers that were having ransomware attacks, and we were able to recover their data after they had this ransomware attack, and that was our thing. We pride ourselves on being successful at that, but we didn't have anything in place to stop them from getting it in the first place, because that wasn't our lane. That wasn't what we did. We did backup and disaster recovery. So what we're doing now is adding the cybersecurity piece to that, so that we can both protect the data on the front end, try to keep it from being messed with in the first place, and then if it ever did, then we can still recover. And backup and disaster recovery is, of course, important for fires, floods, tornadoes, hardware failures, corruption, all that kind of stuff too. So that's important to keep in mind. Start throwing stuff in a second. We should have put tennis balls in the back.
Yeah, this is presenting there. And you can do through as soon as we get this presentation on as another person.
Hey, now we're good on that, Grace. Oh, that's just.
Now we're talking. All right.
Way to go, Jeremy and Matt.
So here's the disclaimer on the fact that we're not going to be doing a dog and pony today. Again, a little bit of information about later. At least I'm taking this. So again, founded in 2013, data protection, disaster recovery, cybersecurity service. We're actually based in Birmingham, Alabama, elements of suburb of Birmingham. So we, what I tell people all the time is they're like, well, it'd be nice if you were local. I'm like, well, do you want your disaster recovery company in the same place where you are? Generally not. So we can be somewhere else. So on that note, we actually have clients in 12 states, all the way up to 2 boxes in Anchorage, Alaska. I keep trying to go on site to go do maintenance on those boxes, but nobody is sending. So.
You're just trying to share with
Gotcha. We want them to see it too. Ah, cool. Now I can see it on my screen here. Okay. All right. So a lot of what we do is public sector. I know probably almost nobody in here probably is with public sector, but that's a lot of what we do. And then we do a lot of commercial business in addition to public sector as well. So we do a lot of local and county government stuff. So we actually have, not far from here, we actually have Kingsland, Georgia, St. Mary, Georgia, and Camden County, just north of the border here. And I make the joke all the time, our primary service is actually restful nights and warm fuzzy feelings. It's not really technology because at the end of the day, people just want to know that it's taken care of. All right.
Thanks.
All right, so a little bit about us. So today it's going to be me speaking and then Cole as well. Cole, in addition to having the coolest name in IT, is actually one of the sharpest people I've ever met from a cybersecurity standpoint. We do make the joke if he gets any bigger, we're going to call him Cole 3 Bears instead of 2 Bears. He's going to be leading a workout later in the hallway out there, if you're ready. So I always like to just mention who we are, and it's not really to brag about anything, but when I hear somebody speak, I want to know kind of 3 things. What's their kind of educational background, what's their experience, and then what certifications and that kind of things they have. So just so you know, this is my 20th year of IT. I got this baby face, but I've been doing this since 2001. I do have an MBA and a BS in MIS, and then random certificates from back in the day, MCSE 2003. Cole has been at it just about 20 years as well, and he's got more certs than I can list. In addition, including certified ethical hacker. He's got a BS degree as well, and then he's dual CCNP. He's actually passed the written test for CCIE. He's just waiting for the labs to open up in Cisco to be able to do actual finished CCIE, so that's pretty awesome. Yeah, CCIEs are like a unicorn. Like I've never actually met one. I'm sure they exist, but it's one of those things where I never met one. So, all right, enough about us. We're going to get into this particular case study. So as some background, this is a backup customer we've had for 5 years, been a long-time customer of ours, loyal customer. We have 10 servers and 6 terabytes a day, which is relatively small for us. Our average customer probably is 25 servers and 15 terabytes a day. So a little bit of background about them. We won't be talking about their names specifically just because of anonymity purposes. They've got around 300 employees and a whole bunch of different sites, actually all over the U.S. They had an outdated security posture, as do so many people these days. What I mean by that is basically they had a firewall and some antivirus, and that's it. And the firewall wasn't even great. I'll let Cole get into more detail on that in a bit. They really looked at technology as a cost center and not as a strategic advantage. So it's really just technology was something that just they used to get by in the day. Didn't really have anything to do with being successful. And then, so I've changed the name, so we're going to refer to Tim Smith today as the actual contact that we have at the company. So as we added this cybersecurity piece the middle of last year, we started calling our current customers and talking to them about cybersecurity. And this is the comment that we got from Tim when we called him about the cybersecurity offering that we had. So it was, this is important to note the date here was September 10th. So we talked to him on September 10th. We're good. We don't need anything. We're fine. And I'm sure you guys, get calls all the time or make calls all the time and get that same answer. But to look, so that was September 10th. So October 19th, they had a phishing attack, which for anybody would be bad, but for them was particularly bad because all of the credentials for the company were compromised, and then they didn't have any password change policy in place at all. And not only did they not have any password change policy at all, end users weren't even allowed to change their own password. And in addition to that, Tim had a spreadsheet with everybody's password in it. So not great, you might say. And then, on top of that, they didn't have any multi-factor authentication again. Right, they had a firewall and antivirus, and that's it. So they knew about this. They actually figured out that this had happened to them. What they didn't realize was on November 4th, there was activity on their network that started to happen. This is actually information that we found after the fact, doing some forensic investigation after the fact to try to figure out when this actually started. So they actually had, we know that their whole Active Directory was enumerated so that the hackers were able to go in and find everything on the network by name, locate all the different users, all the computer servers, that kind of thing. And then there was all kinds of ping sweeps on the network to look at all, to figure out every single network device on the network. And none of that was noticed by anyone. They just completely went on about their daily, deal, nothing there. And then on November 18th, so this is really, all in tight time frame, I get a call from Tim, who's a bit frantic, and says, basically, I'm not sure what's going on. I just got a call on my way to the office, but I think we may have ransomware. That's all I got right now. I'm like, okay. So we're checking backups, making sure everything's looking good. Everything's fine right up until before this happened, so no problem. For most of our customers, we do backups once an hour. So, we have a ton of different recovery points to recover from, which makes it really nice. The real complicating factor was that payroll was due to their payroll company that evening. And the comment from the CEO was, I don't need people burning down my house. So that was a problem. The scope started sinking in, which we'll get into detail, but basically the long story short was every single workstation was encrypted, every single server was encrypted, nothing was usable. And then basically at that point, I sent our team in. So they were a local customer to us in Alabama, so I would, rolled one of my backup guys and then sent Cole over, and Cole really hadn't been with us for a couple of months. And I was like, you sure you want to get involved in all this? And he was like, yep. So we went in there and really took over from there. So I'm going to actually hand it over to Cole at this point and let him take it from there, since he was the guy that was actually on site from there, and then I'll pick up at the end and kind of sum it all up when we get done.
Thanks, Kevin. Right, so as Kevin spoke to, I arrived on site. Let's see, going a long way. There we go. So I was able to see from the get-go that the bad actors had been there for a while due to the breadth of the attack. And when I arrived on site, it was clear that the organization had no idea how to move forward. Tim, the IT manager, and the executive team were all just huddled around the server rack looking at it. So I wasn't really sure what their end game was to look at the server rack. And so I came in, introduced myself. We had our backup engineer already working on getting good restore points. And I told the executive team and the IT staff, I said, can you please join me in the boardroom for a moment? I'd like to go over a whiteboard session to get you guys up and going. And they said, well, no, we don't want to do that right now. We're not interested in the sales pitch. We want to get back up and running. I said, I completely understand. I would never come into this type of situation to perform a sales pitch. The point of the whiteboard session is actually to gather information about your organization and to create an action plan on how to move forward. So during that time period, we were able to determine that all of their servers were in fact encrypted, as well as every single workstation. So when our backup team received the initial call that there was an encryption event, our manager of the backup services rightfully so said, go ahead and power everything off. Well, when everything was powered off, the endpoints were going through the script the bad actors had created to encrypt everything with their private key. So there were some workstations that were at varying degrees of encryption, but all had some degrees of encryption. Some were at the point where they would boot up and you could do some things with them, and then others just came up to a ransom note. And through the course of information gathering, we were able to determine that they had 16 physical locations and that every single location was impacted. And based upon the ransom note and the type of attack it was, I was able to let the executive team know, hey, you need to go ahead and get your cyber insurance policy in order. You likely have an exfiltration. And they were kind of hesitant to move forward with that because they didn't want to get involved with that process. But we knew based upon the behavior this was likely an exfiltration. And the organization was paralyzed. As Kevin referred to earlier, they were attempting to get payroll out, and the CEO had said, I don't want people burning my house down. And the reason why is this was on November 18th. This is right before Black Friday. This is right before the holiday season, and people are expecting their paychecks in the holiday season. That's not an unfair request. And not only on top of that, where they have the ransomware event, they were already late on payroll. So as many of you business owners know, when you're late on payroll, you can actually pay an additional fee. Your bank will wire transfer the funds for the extra fee. Well, they had already reached that point because, again, it's November 18th, 2020, been a hard year. A lot of people were out on vacation, and those that were there were kind of checked out due to the holiday season. So this was a very stressful time for this organization, and they couldn't do anything. And I mean anything. They couldn't log into Active Directory. They couldn't check email. The end users could check email, but the executive team and the admins of IT could not. So from that whiteboard session, we were able to determine an action plan on how to best move forward, and we engaged with our backup and disaster recovery team along with myself on an actual plan. We had to take everything offline, and the reason being is the organization had an ISP with an SD-WAN solution. However, the SD-WAN solution wasn't configured properly to where the routing would allow for different VLANs or subnets to be taken off at a time. Everything was flat within the customer's end of the network. They only had a layer 2 presence. There was no layer 3 topology, so I wasn't able to spin up the servers in a protected environment. We had to ensure that everything was actually powered off on the endpoints because you never know what type of question.
Yeah, can you explain the difference between what you just explained with the flat networks versus the segmented or VLAN networks, so people understand why that was an issue?
Sure. So when you have a network, it's a best practice to have a logical division between where your servers are, where your different locations are. And this organization didn't have it. They just kind of had everything lumped together where everything could communicate with each other without any barriers in between. That's a general summarization.
And while we're taking a break, does everybody know what we mean by exfiltration? We take that for granted. If you want to do a little, like, 2 seconds on
Yeah, sure. So exfiltration, as we know historically with ransomware, the bad actors will encrypt the data, meaning the data is there, but you can't access it unless they give you a password to be able to view it. And historically, that has been very successful. But as companies like ThinkGard have come along and they developed really good backup disaster recovery solutions, the bad actors noticed they were no longer receiving the ransom payments, and they're in the business of making money just like anybody else. So what they started to do is they said, hey, well, we've got access to this data. Let's start taking it. And then they threatened to release the information if you don't pay the ransom. So that's what exfiltration is. They take the data and expose it publicly. Now, in a first assessment, you may not think that's a big deal, but we're going to take a step into the data that was taken from the organization to give you an idea of how damning that can be when your data is exfiltrated. So we went through the process of getting the admins back access to Active Directory. For those of you that know, Active Directory is what contains the usernames and passwords to the environment. And nowadays everybody says, well, I have a cloud solution, I'm protected. Well, with O365 environments in Azure, unless you're cloud native fully, meaning all of your servers are in Azure, your on-premise Active Directory is actually in control of all that. So if you lose access to that, you lose access to everything. So the bad actors were in this organization's email unfettered. They had access to all the email, and not only have access to it, they could read it and send from those accounts as those individuals. So you can think of how damaging that can be if you're in the CEO's or CFO's email and you're able to send and receive emails. You're able to make wire transfers based on that. You're able to sign contracts with DocuSign. Just all the things you can do once you have that level of access. And we had to perform some Active Directory backflips and logical jumps to get Tim back access to his Office 365 environment. And once we did that, that was really a huge step into getting the bad actors out. And then the next step was to reach out to the managed service provider to gain access to the firewall, to see what the configuration was, and to see what logs were available, because these logs leave a breadcrumb trail of what actually transpired. So we had our action plan in place. We took those 30 minutes that the executive team thought was going to be a sales pitch, and we developed an action plan. And based on that action plan, we had a really good path forward. And I once again came to the executive team and said, okay, we have a path forward. Before we move forward, I want to confirm that you want to prioritize recovery over forensics. And the reason I make that important distinction is in certain situations, there may be a higher priority of forensics to figure out what was accessed and who accessed it. And whenever you perform a recovery, you're writing over that data at the block level. And you need to retain backups or restore backups to alternate locations so that the forensics team can come in and determine exactly what files were accessed. So not only that the file server was accessed, but the particular files. And the executive team said, no, go ahead and proceed. And it does add a significant amount of time to prioritize forensics. So
It's time and cost, right? From an insurance perspective?
Well,
if they're not covered, they're going to be in the pocket.
So for the interesting thing about cyber insurance is for your cyber insurance claim to cover you, you have to have their forensics team come in and analyze everything. So that's twofold. That's one, to cover themselves from a litigation standpoint so they can know what all was lost. And then two, if there are certain situations where if there was documentation that you had a security assessment and you didn't address those items, the CEO's executive team can actually be held personally liable depending on the nature of your business, that action steps weren't created. So the response of, it's not in the budget, that doesn't hold up in court. That there's a term called willful negligence that applies in certain situations like this.
There's also the case of forensics takes more time than recovery.
Yes.
So a lot of times it's an expedience question. As in this case for payroll, they probably want to get everything recovered so that they can get the payroll part covered, as opposed to forensics, which again takes more time because you have to offload that data so that you can scrub it and clean it, as opposed to getting right to the business.
So we determined the date of encryption, and that was the morning of the attack. And as Kevin referred to earlier, back on November 4th, that's when the bad actors began enumerating the network. And we were actually able to go back even further into mid-October to see where the credentials were phished and then used. And one thing led to another, and that's how they work. Basically, the bad actors came through a command and control network using email credentials to gain access to the network. So we knew how it came in, and so now it's time to execute the plan on how to stop it. We brought the most critical servers online first. Thankfully, our backup and disaster recovery solution allows us to spin up even a physical server in a virtual environment on a separate network that has no access to the standard network. And then we're able to go in there and identify indicators of compromise or any particular telltale signs we may need to see to know if that server is still impacted, because we know when the bad actors gained access, but you have a balance there. You know when they had access, you know when the server was encrypted, but you don't want the customer to lose too much data. And so you have to go through and see and look at the backups about what restore point to restore from and then which files to restore, because these bad actors are in these organizations for a long time. It's called prevent persistent threat. So in some organizations, it's been observed that bad actors are there for up to a year, just gathering information, documenting the network. And most of the time, these bad actors have documented the customer's network better than their own IT staff. I've personally seen in Notepad, IP addresses, diagrams, all done in Notepad, and they store it on the server. And you may say, well, why do they do that when the internal IT does it? Well, they're going to get paid $500,000, $1 million, $2 million for their work. And that's all they have to do. They don't have to support anybody. So we brought the most critical servers offline. We were able to look for indicators of compromise, put our security solutions in place, scan for malware, because the issue you have here is what the payload was, but then you don't know what other logic bombs may be in there. Because with these types of threats, back historically, going back to 2010, 2012, 2015, it was actual malware. You downloaded the wrong thing and got hit. Nowadays, this is an actual human being behind a keyboard connected to your network, connected to your endpoints working. So there are these things that aren't necessarily deemed malicious, but if used in the right hands, they can be malicious. So we have to look out for those type of items. And then we recommended all passwords be changed immediately. All the domain admin passwords were changed to prevent reaccess. And we had enough systems day one to run payroll. So 7 hours after I arrived on site, the organization was back up and functioning from a payroll standpoint. Payroll went out before I left that evening.
No houses.
Yeah, no houses.
And they complain about the cost of the service after you get on?
No.
Unfortunately.
Hey, with the exfiltration, are they doing that in a single data dump, or are they trickling it out, or is there a way that you can see how that happens?
Yes, and sir,
Jeremy.
Jared.
Yep.
Click word work.
Well, we have forensic evidence. It doesn't seem to be displayed.
Johnny, this may not have been the most recent one I sent you.
Okay.
I just got it on the thumb drive. We can throw it real quick.
Sure.
I was thinking that too.
But to answer your question, the really good threat actors, they will trickle it out over a period of time, and they'll use non-standard ports for exfiltrating it. As an example, DNS is what the service computers use to translate IP addresses to host name, like google.com is really an IP address like 172.32.91.28. So there's a port 53, that is used for that service. And these bad actors will send that out over that port so that it can go undetected. And that's why it's one of the best practices to only allow your DNS servers, your Active Directory servers to communicate outbound on port 53 DNS. So to answer your question, it is generally triggered by the best threat actors, but in this case, it was all at once.
Not just because the way the network was not set up, right?
No, I think they were brazen enough and knew that their configuration was so poor that they could just do it all at once. Why try to do that?
Sounds like a classic 1994 network, right?
Yeah, that's what I always refer to as the 98 or 2000 network. And you'll actually be surprised at how many organizations are like that. And it's not just small mom and pop operations. I mean, these are organizations that, do $100, $200 million in revenue at that level.
But they got it.
Yeah.
Or you meant the GM for a couple days, but you should have it on there.
So I'm going to go back a little because we really want everybody to be able to see this, because I feel like this is very pertinent information for everyone in the group to see and online. So as you can see here, this is the ransom note that the organization received. This was something that I collected during that 30-minute whiteboard session. I know it may be a little hard to see, so I'm going to read some of this for you. So it says, welcome to Dark Side. They are a threat group that focuses on larger organizations And most of their ransoms, their average, are $2 million. And we know that because they gain access to networks, and then they actually go into your financials to see what your annual revenue is. And then they know, well, that they can afford $2 million. So one of the things I always like to point out, because I think it's funny, is what guarantees? We value our reputation. If we do not do our work and liabilities, nobody will pay us. This is not in our interest. All our decryption software is perfectly tested and will decrypt your data. We will also provide support in case of problems. Here's the funny thing, these are criminals, but they're not lying. So I have a way to go out and safely access their Tor site. And you go out to their Tor site and you get proof of life, you get to see what files are out there. And it's just like whenever you go to AT&T or Verizon or wherever, a little chat box pops up and says, hello, your agent is currently offline. How may I help you? And you can just submit your case ID, which is redacted. And then they'll email you back and say, send me a file and I'll decrypt it for you. And then they'll decrypt the file. And if you pay the ransom, they'll send you the key and you can go through and decrypt all your files. But they actually have a customer service. So I'm going to read some of this out because I know it's kind of small. So what we see here, and anything that is personally identifiable, we have redacted. You see financial statements and bank audits and previous year's financial statements. And this is important because, like we referred to earlier, this allows the bad actors to determine what your ransom should be. So here's where we get into more damaging information. You have the 2009 employee W-2s. What else could be needed to perform identity theft on an individual? We've got social security numbers, dates of birth, 2020 salaries, compensation and payroll, employee evaluations, and HR investigations. So a lot of this information is what the executive team would not want their employees to know. And while this didn't happen in this case, there are other examples of cases where one that comes to mind is one for a psychiatric hospital where the bad actors didn't even encrypt the data and they exfiltrated it without, do you have a question, sir? Okay. Where they exfiltrated the data without letting the organization know, and they started reaching out to the patients independently. And when they did that, they were saying, if you pay us $200, we won't release this information. And so what they can also do is go through and, they can go through Instagram, LinkedIn, and they can actually buy ads that targets people that you know. This has also been done. So they're getting more creative in their approach now that backup disaster recovery solutions have come so far. But you still have to have sir, do you have a question?
Yes. But also, do you go to the application level to find out if you get any virus or any something? You know what I'm saying? Because you can find out through the penetration or the network, everything is okay, but they may have done something damage to the application itself.
Yes, yeah, and that's something we're going to go through in one of our slides in regarding to our catch service. So as you can see here, you have that information, and so that's how bad actors continue to evolve as defense continues to evolve. And there are more examples of data that would not want to be released. You have drug testing and litigation. Going back to the instance where they had access to the executive team's email, say you were involved in a litigation and you say, hey, I'll settle this lawsuit if you wire transfer me $20,000. And then they DocuSign. Well, now you got to go through and prove that was not you that DocuSigned from your own account, from your own DocuSign account, and receive those funds. Now we're going to go through some of the other examples that we missed earlier. So going back to the actual remediation, we closed all the open firewall ports. We requested from the vendor the configuration of the firewall, and I realize this is hard for you to see in the audience. This reference is here. It basically says inside to outside, outside to in, allow everything. So they had a firewall in place and it allowed everything. So anything and everything that wanted to come across was allowed. And what really gets me is the vendor felt the need to put a deny any rule in, because at the end of every access list, there's an implicit deny any. So that rule's there by default. But they added it in after they said allow anything. So allow everything, but if you're not everything, denied. That makes no logical sense. And Kevin sent me a text to know how it was going. And this was my response to him after I saw that.
Yeah, the text said, all the firewall ports are open, it's like this. I'm like, there's forest.
The firewall sees it, just like, come on in, it's great.
Great place to hang out.
So as part of our remediation, we implemented a trial of our content filter. And to call it a web filter by category is correct. But that's really a miscategorization because it does so much more. It's able to do IP-based as well as host-based filtering. It's able to do things like restrict the users to their Google or Office 365 tenant.
Is that proprietary or do you use a third party?
We use a third party. And then we also implemented a trial of our cross-platform detection and response. Again, what we did here is we knew the firewall was poor. We made the best configuration changes we could. And instead of trying to fight the battle of replacing the firewall, we just secured around it to protect the organization. And with our cross-platform detection and response solution, we're able to go through and see at the host level if it's making bad calls to IP addresses. As an example, you'll see some endpoints try to reach out to a specific IP address 142 times in a minute, and this stops things like that. And at the end of...
This is set the next day, so this is November 19th.
And so on November 19th, there were nearly 60 endpoints online in addition to the servers, and the important thing to remember here is this was after everything was encrypted. Everything. So it was really a huge milestone to have that many endpoints online. And we put out hotspots, and this is where we refer to our catch service, to where we're going through and making sure that everything is doing what it's supposed to. So yes, you could have someone come in and analyze every line of code for every single application, as you see in the source chain attacks, the supply chain attacks like with SolarWinds. But really what's most important, those codes can change at any time, is to look at what's actually going on. For example, if a suspicious person came in this room and started pacing back and forth, keeping their hands in their pockets, not making eye contact, somebody would say, hello, ma'am, sir, are you okay? Can we help you with something? And that's the way it should be from a network perspective. Let's not focus on a specific application or a specific program to make sure it's patched, it's up to date. Obviously do those things, but there needs to be a holistic approach of how is everything communicating? Are you communicating on the right port? Are you going where you're supposed to? And if this type of solution had been in place, things like the supply chain attacks would have generated notifications, not necessarily stopped it, but people would have a better idea up front because you would know, hey, the SQL server is not supposed to be trying to communicate with every endpoint in the organization.
So the 60 endpoints online, did you re-image those or how did you bring them back online?
So what we did, that was part of our catch service. It was a combination of the local IT staff re-imaging devices. Okay. And then there were certain endpoints. We were able to ban the malicious hashes to keep them from executing until the team was able to go through and re-image. So there were high priority endpoints that were identified, and we went in before they were brought online. We were able to examine the hashes. And when I say a hash, what I'm referring to is there are executables that run on a desktop, for example, word.exe. Well, just because word.exe is named word.exe doesn't mean it's word.exe. So what a hash does is it analyzes the executable to see what the actual contents are. And then you're able to analyze that to see, is this 80% of word.exe supposed to be? Is it 70%? And so if it's over a certain threshold, you know that that exe has been modified to the point that it's malicious. So that's the process we went through there. We continued to dig in deeper, and we finally got some logs from the ISP aside from what we were previously shown, because as part of their managed service security program, they were supposed to have 60, 90 days of logs. And when we finally received the logs, there was nothing there from the dates of the attack. So what actually happened was, in my belief, is the firewall solution authentication was integrated with Active Directory. The bad actors wiped it off. Wow. And knowing that we weren't going to be able to get the information from the firewall logs and having knowledge of the SD-WAN solution in place, I then pivoted my approach and said, okay, I know this SD-WAN solution has what's called application visibility control, to where it's able to use network-based application response and awareness to identify the applications being used along with the destination. So I was able to dig into the SD-WAN solution from the route perspective and see that the amount of data exfiltrated was actually sent to Mega File Share in New Zealand from the server that contained all of the data. And at that point, I was physically sick for that organization. Logically, I knew that their data had been exfiltrated, but when I saw that, I was very upset because I knew more than the organization knew of all the litigation, all the steps they were going to have to go through as part of that, because a lot of the times when we think about ransomware, when we think about exfiltration, we focus on the point of business continuity, getting the business back up and operational. That is true, that needs to be done, but often what is more damaging is the after effect. Some organizations financially can't withstand attacks like this because, you have to go through and you have to get identity theft protection. There are civil lawsuits as a result of it. Real people's lives are impacted from events like this. So that's why I was so impacted by that. I know it's hard to see probably on the screen. I'm going to step through a couple of these. So this is the log file of where the firewall was logging the traffic going back out to Austria. Again, there were no security filtering, no security intelligence put in place. And a couple of things to go through. You can see group SSO guest users, source guest. This actually wasn't guest. This was the Active Directory domain admin account. And because the managed service provider didn't have the integration between Active Directory and the firewall working correctly, everything looked like it was guest traffic. You can see here the firewall action, checkmark, firewall action, checkmark, close. So it's important to note here, and we'll have another slide to illustrate this as well. Whenever it says close at the end of that statement, you have an option whenever you're configuring firewall policies to log at the beginning of the connection or log at the end of the connection. And for security purposes, it's often best to log at the beginning of the connection because you get more information, more detail. It is acceptable for a permit statement to log at the end of the close. And so this is again showing the policy was intentionally set to close, meaning they intended for this traffic to be permitted. Again, you can see it over and over again, same traffic, over and over again to Austria. No alerts were generated. The customer was never reached out to that they had information going out to Austria. And really, to the customer's point, they should have been notified.
So was this a managed firewall from an ISP?
Yes. And we
It
have
was managed with air quotes.
Yeah, well.
So we have actually seen 3, just within our own firm, we've seen 3 ransomware attacks with this same ISP. And the reason being is the sales team comes in and says, yes, we're going to manage this firewall. You don't have to do anything. And importantly, the customer has no visibility. They can't gain access. I was only able to gain access because of a special use case. And whenever you talk to the technical team at this ISP, they say, yes, we do manage it, but we only do what the customer tells us. So you've got the sales team coming in telling the customer, hey, we're going to handle it all for you. You've got the technical team say, we only do what you say. So they're going to put the IP in to make the traffic work.
There's a lawsuit itself.
Yeah.
lot of happy lawyers in this.
And as we referred to earlier, we had the exfiltration. And now I'm gonna hand it back over to Kevin.
Nice job.
All right, so at this point, now we're talking December 3rd. We've gotten through Thanksgiving, we've gotten back from Thanksgiving. Things are kind of somewhat getting back to normal for them. So at this point, all their servers are back online. That first day, we got enough online to do payroll. So it's like domain controller and accounting server, and that was it, or whatever. All critical workstations are up by this point. So again, this is sort of 2 weeks in. And 2 weeks is kind of the magic number we keep seeing with most people as far as in these ransomware attacks. They want to be back up and running immediately. The thing to go ahead and prepare yourself for now, if this happens to you, it's going to be about 2 weeks before you really get back up and running. Theirs ended up being even a little bit longer than that. At this point, the remaining machines were coming online, and they were able to finally be strategic. All right, we're going to actually sit down and make a plan. Of course, our sales team is talking to them about our managed security stuff and whatever else, but they didn't want to make a snap decision. They didn't want to make a decision with a gun to their head, that whole thing, and we totally appreciated that. But the trials that we had put in place for them to use that didn't cost them anything, didn't cost us anything, they were about to run out. So they had to figure something out. So we're going to be strategic. We're going to figure all this out. And then they get an email. So they get an email from a cybersecurity news website that says, hey, we have found all of this information about you on the dark web, and it looks pretty damning. And would you like to make a comment for the story that we're about to write about it online? So basically, they found the data on the dark web, they asked for a comment, and they did publish the story a few days later that we did find online. But basically, and again, kind of redacted, but it basically says, we found all this stuff, and it was X number of gigs that we found on this hacker forum. We didn't have anything to do with this, but can you confirm it? Were you aware of it? And have you informed your customers yet? It's like, we knew about it, but no, we haven't done anything else. So that kind of forced their hand a little bit on that too. So it's just as they were starting to take a breath after, then they get this gut punch, which is awesome. And then once it was all said and done, basically what we found, sort of this is the sum up of the whole thing, was we had the critical servers up and running the first day. Secondary servers were all up and running the day after that. They had over 500 PCs. They ended up having to reload. They didn't even know how many PCs they had. They initially told us they had 300. And it was over 500 by the time it's all said and done. It was a total of a 4-week process to really get back to everything was relatively back to normal. And you know how it is. It'll never really be normal again for a while, but it's normal operations after 4 weeks. We estimate they lost at least $100,000 of productivity, just people who couldn't work. I mean, if it's salaried employees, are you going to not pay them even though they can't do anything? We had another customer that was hit a couple weeks ago. It was in the distribution business, and their warehouses didn't ship anything for a week. They had 3 different warehouses all over, and they didn't ship a single thing for a week.
Could you share what industry this company was in?
No.
Okay.
It would give it away too much.
Okay.
It would make it too easy to figure out. So yeah.
You have a question, Amber?
Yeah.
How much did they lose?
At least $100,000. I mean, we didn't get numbers from them specifically, but I mean, when you have several hundred employees that can't work for at least a week, and they're twiddling their thumbs doing nothing, it's really easy to calculate X number of hours by number of average hourly rate will give you a pretty good idea of loss of productivity. And then we also know they had at least $100,000 of direct recovery costs by the time they had to hire. So they only have a centralized IT staff in Alabama, but then they have locations, 16 locations in other places. They actually hired local IT companies to come in and reload PCs for them, that kind of stuff. Sure.
Is there insurance on these, or can they take out policies?
There's cyber insurance that's available. It pays for different things that costs associated with this, and direct costs are the easiest ones to get repaid because it's obvious as to what it was. It's the more loss of confidence of your customer and that kind of thing. Like, how do you put a number on that? But direct costs are the easiest way. And it's the same kind of thing with we saw with CARES Act funds with our government customers, is they could go and say, I had to hire extra costs to direct traffic at the COVID testing center. I can relate those costs specifically to that thing, and that makes it easier in an insurance situation. So it's the intangibles that's harder to deal with when it comes to the insurance piece of it. All right, so then we help them implement a new security strategy, right? So we actually looked at adding a enhanced detection response endpoint protection for their endpoints. So this is traditionally what you would think of as antivirus and malware protection all in one, and it can actually even isolate machines from the network that are infected. So it's a whole step above what you would normally think about endpoint protection. We put an internet content filtering that can actually block this bad traffic to the internet so that these things can't happen. We revamped their firewall configuration by actually making a firewall configuration. Put in a network monitoring solution, which is basically what Cole was talking about as far as the random person with their hands in their pockets and not making eye contact. It's like, what's weird that's going on over here? That's not normal. It can identify things like that. And then we put in email protection too, because phishing is how this whole thing got started in the first place. So we want to stop at each one of these places. So I like to liken the strategy that we're using to something along the lines of, a castle. We want a moat and a fence and a wall and some archers on top and all these different things that we can do to try and stop at any different levels of the attack when it happens. And then we're managing it all for them now. So that's the biggest thing is they didn't have anybody really day-to-day managing their security, and now they do. And then just some key takeaways before we go. I know we're kind of jamming up against time here, and I'll leave a couple minutes for questions. But basically, this is kind of how we look at things, is how would you do things differently today if you knew 100% that you were going to be hit? Do that. We want to be thinking along those lines now instead of later. So just to run through, I got a couple of key points, takeaways, whatever. So this is not a unique situation. This is actually almost identical situation has happened 4 times in our client base in the last 3 months. I mean, this is something that's happening all over the place. And I really, we've been talking about ransomware in the backup and disaster recovery space for the last 5 or 6 years pretty consistently. I really expected by now I wouldn't be giving presentations about ransomware anymore, but here I am. It's as much of a problem today as it has ever been. And they're getting a lot better at it, and it's a lot worse than it was.
Don't you think that's because it starts with the person who opens the email?
Sure.
I mean, it's hard to control people as much as people who don't have monitoring systems in.
Our biggest joke is there is somebody at your organization that will click on anything. And you're probably as technical thinking of who that person is right now. If you don't know who that person is, so, but it's funny because we'll see people at least giving presentations, they're like, oh yeah, that's Steve. So anyway, so this is not a unique situation. Be prepared. It has a very high likelihood of happening. Cultivate a security awareness culture within your organization. Figure out who that person is, and then give them some extra training on here's what you need to look out for. There's a whole bunch of really inexpensive educational materials that are out there that you can provide to people and keep them on task. If you have a managed solution, you still need to know how it works. Keep these people accountable. If at any point in time, Tim would have asked to see the stuff, he would have looked at that, and even as not a really super technical person, would have been like, well, that doesn't look right. So you have to understand how it's working, and you have to keep your vendors accountable. The way we do stuff, and this isn't, again, me plugging us, is the way all of our systems work on backup and disaster recovery and on security. Our customers have full access to see all of it. It's not a black box. It's not just we got this, don't worry. It's by all means, go in there and look at it and ask me questions if you don't understand how it's set up. You need to know how it's set up and how it works. Traditional AV and firewall are not sufficient. I don't want to pick on specific vendors, but if you're running an antivirus that you would have run 15 years ago, stop it. He said it. Symantec, trend, whatever. It's not good enough. And then the best products and tools in the world are useless if they're not configured properly. This is kind of basic, but it's true, and we see it over and over and over again. They're like, but I got the thing. You haven't updated it in 2 years. And then cybersecurity is a specialized skill set. What we find is if you don't have 10,000 people who work for your organization, you don't have enough staff to hire a full-time cybersecurity expert. So you're going to have to fill all those other roles. You got help desk, you got sysadmin, you got all the other things that you have to have, but you don't have the budget to also hire a full-time cybersecurity person. So you got to partner with somebody who can help you do that. And then Yeah, so it's got to have dedicated resources, and it requires constant training. Cole spends an hour a day at least just doing research on new threats. Because then once you learn the new threats, then you can apply that to your current client base on a proactive basis. So we're even seeing things industry specific. Something will come out for manufacturing, something will come out for healthcare, whatever else, and we can apply those. All right. I know we've answered questions as we've gone along, but I'm open for whatever at this point. And if it's for Cole, you might want to come here for Cole so you can answer.
So Jimmy, can you explain to me when you're onboarding a new customer, what type of network assessment do you do for the customer to determine the level of service you need to provide them?
That's a really good question. That's one of the things we go over during our onboarding is I have been doing penetration testing, all these third-party assessments that cost $100,000 for years. And I found the most effective way is to have a conversation with the customer.
And he was doing it on the customer side. He was the one having the assessment performed on the organization he was working for.
So what we do is what you're referring to, what products are you using? Okay, and then, so we have a very deep knowledge of all the products in use, even though they may not be the ones that we recommend. We can say, do you have this feature enabled? Do you have this feature enabled? What is your network configuration? Who's your ISP? What's your logical topology look like? And a lot of customers, when you start digging in, they don't know. Or we find what they thought they have, they don't have.
What we've seen several times, and it's ridiculous, people will have the Cisco firewall with firepower threat defense or whatever built in. And they're like, cool, I paid for all that. And you go in and look in the firewall, and the checkbox that turns it on is not checked.
Yeah.
So they paid for it, they have it sitting there, but it's doing nothing.
And so that goes back to that $100,000 network or security assessment is null because you're going to pay that, and then you're going to try to implement the remediation from a customer standpoint, and then the executive team says, well, we just paid $100,000 to spend on this. We can't remediate because of the cost. So does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Got time for one more question?
And if I can mention too, real quick, there's actually a survey in the backs here. If y'all wouldn't mind filling out the survey, we'll do a presentation like this several times this year, and this is the first time that we've done this particular one. So we love feedback as far as, I think it's maybe.
Is there a QR code in the
Oh, I'm sorry. It's a QR code in the handout that you can scan and actually take you there. Yeah, and then I think you can actually also go to. I think that works. Yeah. Okay.
So,
Yes.
so I'm sure this doesn't get advertised, but from the companies that fall victim to this, what percentage would you say actually end up paying the ransom?
So it actually continues to be is trending towards lower on paying the ransom. Some organizations are forced to pay the ransom because they don't have a backup recovery solution and they have no ways of remediation. It used to be you would see maybe 80–90% of the organizations were paying ransoms, and you also saw that ransoms were lower then. So as the trend continues to go lower as the percentage that are paying the ransoms, you see the price go up, but we're seeing the bad actors adapt. As I alluded to, they're going to look at different ways of getting that ransom from.
For example, Montgomery County, Alabama, where the capital city of Alabama is, got hit with ransomware a couple of years ago, paid a $47,000 ransom. That was 4 years ago. If they get hit today, it would be $1 million. Yeah, I mean, it would be a lot of money.
In your experience, those that paid the ransom, what percentage of their data did they actually recover?
So, yeah, for the organizations that did pay the ransom, they all were able to recover their data because as that note referred to, they actually want to provide the service because these threat groups are branded. It's the dark side group. It's Cozy Bear. So, a quick Google search, or if you're working with a cybersecurity team, they'll be able to tell you, yes, you'll be able to get your data back.
Although I did read an article yesterday that says there's a bunch of new upstarts and whatever else, and it's kind of like the whole mafia thing. It's like sort of the lower guys go out on their own and start their own thing and don't do it as well. And that's kind of, we're seeing a little more of that now where it's like,
I've seen a lower percentage, right?
Yeah.
Where people pay the ransom, they only get 20, 30, 50% of their data back, and they're just screwed.
we don't spend a lot of time on that because we don't pay ransoms inside of our, like I think probably had 15 ransomware attacks inside of our client base and never even looked to see what the ransom was. We don't care. We're not paying.
I find it hilarious that it seems like they're worried about repeat business.
Yeah, all my Google reviews at 5 stars, you know what I'm saying?
Well, everybody, we want to thank Kevin, we want to thank Cole, we want to thank Will. And we'll turn it over to the Chamber for any announcements.
By the way, the ISP was not Unity Fiber. Just make sure.
Thanks for the plug.
We're in Alabama, I'm getting worried.
That's really good clarification. 'Cause that's
Yeah.
probably like-
I was one that we're gonna take some calls in.
So I've got 2 quick chamber announcements. Yes, I do more than just shoot a little thermometer at your foreheads occasionally. I bring these 2 up because they fall back to back in early April, and when we meet again, they will likely both be sold out. So consider that my fair warning in advance. One is the next chamber-wide golf tournament that's taking place out at Valencia. That will be Monday, April 6th. Nope, Monday, April 5th. Last time the IT Council put together a foursome, so y'all keep me posted if that's something you'd like to do again. I look forward to seeing you out there, swinging a stick, enjoying a premium adult beverage. And then secondly, the very next day is the Chamber's trade show. So many of you know this is an annual function that we do. We had to punt it from last year. The date is set. It is happening. We will not change it. We've worked out some terms with UNF where our vendor booths are still essentially sold out. However, as we are combing through who was already locked in for the trade show, there's going to be some natural fallout. So if you or your company is interested in having a vendor booth at our trade show, see that, email me and I'll set you up with our staff contact who's just managing that wait list. Secondarily, as an attendee, what we're doing is we're still offering advanced registration online, and we really highly encourage that because it will sell out. And we've just sort of got like 2 phases of the trade show, sort of like loose time slots, if you will. So you'll see that on our website, myjackchamber.com. Again, golf tournament and trade show in April.
Well, thank you, man. I appreciate it. Membership, you have a couple minutes, brief?
Yeah, really quick. Thank you. My name is Alex, by the way, and we have a lot of new faces. If this is your first time here, do you mind standing up really quick? No, we have a lot of new faces. So thank you all for coming. Really appreciate you guys being here. This year, guys, we're really focused on growth. Just spread the word, guys. Spread the word. We really, really want to grow back to what we were before COVID. So this is everybody's job here to spread the word. For all the new folks that are here, we'd love to chat with you for a few minutes and see how you guys can help us out. We're also looking for committee members. We have a couple of different things that we're hoping to fill. So talk to any board member about that as well. All right. Thanks again.
Hey, while you're up there, we're also trying to expand our happy hour. Could you talk briefly?
Sure. We do happy hours, and Mark, you want to come up here really quick?
It's okay. It's okay.
The happy hour is the second week of.
It's the
Thursday before the meeting.
Before, it's like the third Thursday, or basically the Thursday prior to our regular meeting.
So third Thursday of the month is the virtual happy hour. We are having a ball with that, so just keep a lookout for that. Whether it's on LinkedIn, I'll make sure that we put it out there and make sure that give you plenty of notice. And plus also we'll be sending invites via email. So very cool event.
4 to 5.
4 to 5.
1 hour.
1 hour.
And we're looking for topics. We're trying to trend each month with a different topic. So we've done telecom. We did Black History Month in February. In March, we'd love to have somebody that could be a co-host to talk about a particular technology.
Wonderful. What he said. Thank you all.
All right.
Thank you.
All right.
Hey, good morning, Brian Allen. I know y'all know me. You somewhat maybe know what Career Source is. We're a publicly funded resource. It's February. Our budget ends in June 30th. So there's a motivation. We have funds for training. So if you're like Wendy, if you have any training aspect to your company, call me. I might be able to help people pay for your training. But if you're calling out on people, I know a lot of people in this room focus on higher talent than $25 an hour. But if y'all know call centers, help desk, anything like that, I can reimburse the training of those people. So I'd just love to tell you more. Brian Allen, Career Source. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. One thing I will say is that, that I know that Clay and Kevin were remiss on maybe is that ransomware is so successful that this year in November, Maze, one of the bigger ransomware groups, they retired. They actually retired from ransomware. It's something that's never happened before in the history of man, but they actually retired from crime publicly. They released a press release saying that they were retiring.
Done so well.
And they actually have, so that's one of the pieces to keep in mind.
There was actually a story that came out yesterday, and another one retired, and they gave out their encryption key tool to anybody who wanted it.
Yeah.
Anybody who's still encrypted from times in the past that didn't pay the ransom.
That was nice. And then with Maze, the other thing about Maze is they actually had a non-compete with their hackers that they couldn't go to other groups for. So it was amazing.
$3 trillion, I read the other day, $3 trillion.
It is, yeah, ransomware right now, malware is, it's bigger than drug trade and has been for about 12 years.
You know what's
They
worse?
know we target for the house.
What's worse than that, this is a whole other topic that we could do, is business email compromise is even more than ransomware by a couple of factors up. So just people sending email that looks like it's legitimate, it's actually asking you to pay an invoice or to wire money or whatever else.
Or to buy gift cards.
Yeah, financially is way more than ransomware.
Yeah, very good.
Well, that's a good topic.
I don't think I have anything else. Program, you have anything quickly? No?
No.
All right. So with that, meeting adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Next month, I think we have Microsoft going to be speaking, so please attend that. It's going to be a phenomenal subject that can be going over as well.
That's awesome. Those of you on the call, he said Microsoft's going to be here next week. So make sure you sign up for that.